There he is. So
Okay,
you're a good looking guy. You gotta let people see you.
I'm Dr. Harry Anderson. I live in Weatherford, Texas, and I own and operate Total Feeds Incorporated. It's a small family company of four people that service things nationwide and now internationally and Canada. We have dealers all over the United States and several places in Canada now, and we are in multiple marketing groups all of a sudden. So we've been at this about under the name Total Feeds. We've been at this for 15 years, I guess now, no, 13 years. And before that, I was selling this feed because I made this feed in year 2000. Veterinarian asked me if I could make one formula that would feed all horses and all equine worldwide, no matter age, activity, doesn't matter. And of course, that was a ludicrous question because no one had ever thought that way in the horse industry selling horse feed. As you go into a feed store and look around, and Purina, Nutrina, and those big companies, they'll have 25 to 35 formulas.
Hmm.
And I also wonder why in the world they're doing it. Well, I know I should have known that it's marketing. So I said, okay, I can do that. And I shocked him because I did get it done. And I've shocked the United States with all horse people because I can advertise one formula that will feed 95% of all horses. The only ones that differ are metabolic horses and those special health problems they have. I have a couple of formulas that can help them, but even those can get by quite well on my original formula. The
So what
formula that, go ahead.
what was your I mean, are you a scientist? Are you a nutritionist? What was your background before
Okay.
you started why would the what prompted a veterinarian to ask you to come up with it? Because I imagine them asking me and I'd say, look, I don't know. I'm an
Well,
attorney.
he didn't just ask somebody off the street. I've been in the business for a long time. In fact, I graduated from South Dakota State University with a PhD in nutrition in 1970.
Okay.
I have been on the firing line doing this kind of stuff, marketing, consulting, etc. Since then, 55 years. This year's my 55th anniversary. I have worked with swine, cattle, horses. I've avoided the feathers, but I've worked with almost every species, goats, sheep, over these 55 years. And for about 35 years, most all I did was feedlot nutrition in the mega feed yards in the high placed country of all the way from Montana to South Texas up through that feedlot belt. And at one time, I was consulting with about 750,000 head of cattle while doing the nutrition work for. And that got very, very boring and frustrating. So this guy came along and kind of offered me a better attitude to work with because you know what? Horse people don't work on profit and loss with their horses when they feed them. Like cattle people do. Everything you do has to be profitable and has to be the most efficient. But the positive side to that is that when I started working with the horse nutrition primarily and almost 100% of the time, um, that attitude about being extremely efficient has stuck with me.
Hmm.
Everything I do has to be the most efficient way of doing things. And sometimes I'll spend a little more money to make things a lot more efficient to make everything less expensive, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
So
And I'm going to show you that as we
yeah.
go.
So to give you a segue into your presentation and the digestive stuff and all that, I was thinking about this question this morning. So horses evolved over thousands of years, and to the extent that there is any such thing as a wild horse, okay, I personally consider them feral horses, but to the extent that
Yeah.
there are wild horses, they run from point A to point B, eat grass, then they'll run to a different spot and eat grass. And in the interim, they're procreating, they're doing the herd dynamics. The stallions might be fighting a little bit, but more or less they survive 100% just on grazing and on grass, what they're getting from their natural environment. Why do we need to reinvent that wheel anyway? How come all horse people aren't just feeding um, roughage and hay to horses? Why do we need a separate horse feed when obviously wild horses don't have to have that stuff to get by?
Okay, that's a good question, and I've thought about that myself. Why, why we're spending money on additives and supplements, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the life of the feral horse, and I see a lot of them come through from the Mustang program.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look too good, especially at different times of the year. You see them, sometimes they look fat and slick. That's after about 30, 40 days of fresh spring grass. And then just before that grass comes on, and they've wintered all winter on dead grass and so on, they look pretty rugged. And some of them don't survive, actually don't survive. And they don't reproduce very well. And there's a lot of things they don't have to perform, so they don't have to have some of those high levels of some special nutrients. So that's the reason.
Okay.
But the way they live also has prompted the horse industry to have this saying, and this comes from the veterinary world, nutritionist world, average horse person, they say a horse has to graze constantly. They have to eat constantly. They need to eat every 20 minutes. And if they don't eat every 2 hours, oh man, they're just going to have all kinds of digestive problems. I hear that constantly. And that is a bunch of baloney. I fight it all the time because we have horses all over the country, and I'll show you some of this as we go through it, that are living with zero hay, zero grass. They're eating my feed, 8 pounds of my feed, and nothing else, just water and free choice salt. That's all they get. And they do phenomenally well. And their total eating time for the day is probably about 30, 45 minutes, depending how fast they eat. That's it. What do they do the rest of the day? Like any lazy animal, and they are lazy animals, they they work when they need to work to find feed, or they need to work when they're wanting to please their owner. Otherwise, what do they do? Stand under a shade tree or stand in the corner, kind of their head down, staring at the sky, or maybe playing with their neighbor and biting on them or whatever. But they're not out there looking for work. None of these animals are, whether they're cows or horses, I don't care. So that's my theory, and it works. That's my point, is that we have a lot of people using this program now, and the horses are great. They don't have ulcers, they don't have anxiety problems, they don't chew the barn down, none of that. It has prompted me to kind of, and I do a lot of thinking through the metabolic process, because my PhD was not just nutrition. It was I have minors in physiology and minors in biochemistry. Then I put all these together and I started thinking about this. What prompts an animal to want to eat? Well, I think a lot of people will agree, and it's common knowledge, that the brain, when the sugar level of the body or certain nutrient levels in the blood start to go down, it kicks the brain in gear and says, go eat, go find something. I'm missing this nutrient, I'm missing these nutrients, or whatever it is. Then they will work on whatever they need to do to eat. And if they're out on the range and they're eating nothing but low quality grass in the off season, they have to spend a lot of time getting those nutrients that they need to survive. Especially, and I'm very high on trace minerals. That I think they're a very very critical part of our program. And that's partly what we need to supplement nature is the trace minerals that we provide. But if they're say, let's just I think zinc is one of the big driving forces of that. If a horse is a little short on zinc, they will find a source of zinc. They will eat more grass. They'll eat more hay. They'll eat more. They'll chew the bark off a tree. If they're that's one sign of a zinc deficiency is if they start eating the bark off trees, because for some reason the zinc level in bark, I guess, is higher than a lot of places. So those are the things that I have learned to observe and put into my thought process to come up with what I've done today. And that's the reason horses can survive on nothing but my program and at only about 8 or 9 pounds a day, which is a very small amount of feed. It's a good place maybe to look at how odd that is, because if you take a horse on 4 pounds of my Total Equine, that's a standard feeding rate with hay, and that has 5,300 calories per pound. So we're looking at 10,600 calories, right? Uh, no, 11,000, right? Well, let's just
I
go.
can get my calculator out if you want me to, but if you're asking me to do math in my head, I'll just go. I'll just agree with whatever number you throw out. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's 11,200.
Okay.
And then besides that, if you give them free choice, just plain grass hay, they'll eat 20 pounds. 20 pounds of hay at 900 calories per pound. Now, I think I can do that pretty easy. That's 18,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the number of calories these horses are eating. 20, well, way over 20,000 calories per day. But if I take that hay away and double the Total Equine to 8 pounds, that 11,000 calories is doing a great job for them. No, I'm sorry, 8 pounds, 8
Okay. I'm
times
getting the calculator
13.
out. How many
Okay,
calories is it?
that's oh, I'm sorry. That first one was 5,400 calories from Total Equine. So that would only be 22,000 calories, but still it's over 20,000. Now, if I take and double that, it's 11,600 total. I mean, 10,800 is all they're going to eat.
That's at eight.
50%.
That's at 8 pounds per day.
Yeah, that's 50% of what they'd eat when they're eating hay and 4 pounds total equine.
Okay.
I've asked a lot of scientists, I say, how are they doing that? How is that possible? And they all just kind of stare at me and the glazed over look. Nobody will try to give me an answer on that. Here's my answer. We are fulfilling all of the needs for protein, and the energy is being derived so efficiently from this feed that we're actually providing what they need, because we are providing all of the trace minerals, especially, and minerals that brain perceives that they need to be healthy. So if we're giving all those micronutrients to them, they don't overeat on other ones. Because what kind of bugs me is seeing these horses out here that they're saying, well, they don't need any supplement. Boy, look at how fat and slick they are. Yes, fat and slick, because they're overeating energy so much just to get those micronutrients, trying to, that they're gaining weight and they're putting on fat. They're not putting on muscle. And I'll show you. I have a real prime example of what our program does when we get to that point.
Would it be
Um,
fair? Would it be fair to say that if a horse is eating 20,000 plus calories per day. And like you say, in the attempt to get all the micronutrients that they need, if you're providing everything they need with almost 11,000 calories a day, you got to think they're doing something with those 10,000, that extra 10,000 it's probably just passing through their system. It may never get added to their uh, digestive tract to begin with. Is that fair to say? Just because they're putting the calories in their mouth doesn't mean that their body uses it or absorbs it or does anything with it other than send it right back out the back door, right?
Right. Because if you put fibery stuff in there at too high a level and too fast a rate, you're not going to digest all of it like you should. And that's where we come in too, is we increase fiber digestibility tremendously. Uh, that's one of every customer says that, tells me how horses drop their hay intake so much when they start feeding our program at the 4 pounds. And so yes, that's true. But it also, one of the things is not just the efficiency of digestion, but I use a very certain form of magnesium, which most people won't use because it's very expensive. And this magnesium not only helps the digestion in the digestive tract, but when all these nutrients get to the cell level, it enhances the efficiency of taking that energy into the cell a lot better. So they're literally improving, we're improving the efficiency at every level, whether it's digestion in the small intestine, the large intestine, the bloodstream, at the cell level, we touch it all. And by making all those things more efficient, there's the end result. And now I've been called a heretic and I've been yelled at, I've been swore at about even talking about this concept. Uh, in fact, on the internet, somebody told me there's a post out there that is just ragging on us because we're going to kill horses all over the country. Never had one even bother, never had a problem with all in 15 years. Not bad.
Yeah. What's their argument that this is so bad for horses? You talking about not feeding them hay or the
Yeah, not
magnesium?
feeding hay. Uh-huh. Because they have to graze all the time and they're going to get ulcers and they're going to die from ulcers and they're going to get anxiety problems and they go crazy and da 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 da. I could give you a whole litany
Yeah, and
of
I'm going to
reasons.
want to talk about a lot of these issues because it's going to address the entire reason that I wanted to do this podcast is I'm feeding your feed to my horses, but I have a boarding operation that we have say 25 to 30 horses on our place that don't belong to me that I have. So I let them, their owners dictate what they eat, what supplements they get, etc. And when I bring up total fees, they'll ask me questions. I'm like, I don't know. I just have to ask you. And I said,
Sure.
we should do a podcast. That way I can just share this with them and then hopefully we'll hit all those questions. So
Yeah.
I'm going to want to talk about ulcers. I'm going to want to
Yes.
talk about colic. I'm going to want to
Yes.
talk about the different breeds. So I've got quarter horses, thoroughbreds, warm bloods. Uh, I had ponies. The ponies are no longer here. And then there's some half thoroughbred, half warm bloods. Um, I believe that's everything I have on my farm at the moment. I think that will cover the gambit. But you
That's a
can
nice
imagine,
variety.
that's a pretty wide variety. And
Do they all need different nutrient levels?
well, if you can allow me to share my screen, and I'm not sure this is the same issue you and I were having, um, but if I can share my screen, I went this morning and took a video of my feed room. Okay.
Okay.
And
Oh, I love it.
yeah. So if you could, I think there's a button that you can push that allows me to share my screen. Let me
Okay.
see. Or maybe I have to request.
Okay, let's see. Uh,
Okay.
Green.
This will be fascinating for the watchers, won't it?
Yeah. 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 Two high tech guys trying to do this.
Hey, I've got a solution. I know how to fix. If we can't do it, I'll just turn my camera and point it at my other screen and press play on the video. Okay. If we,
There
in
you go.
fact, maybe I can do that.
I think you're going to have to because I don't find anything down here to do that with.
Okay, so let's see.
There we go.
And you see, let me turn it this way. There you go. You can see that the screen right there.
Yes.
Okay, so now I need to hit play. And it don't need very.
Okay.
So look down at the bottom. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's one shelf. Okay, and this is me just going through the cabinets. We don't feed peanut butter. I'm not sure how that got in there. There's some more supplements and medicines. And let's see. The Smart Pack, that's a pack of supplements that gets mailed.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah, look at this. AM, PM. Look at this. This is what my guys have to go through every day when they make feed for our horses. Every horse has something different.
You know what this uh, I think of when I see this kind of thing is how easy it is to make mistakes.
Yeah. So that just gives you an idea.
Wow. Oh yeah, I'm familiar with this. And in one statement that I can make is that feeding Total Equine, you can eliminate 100% of that cabinet.
It's a
Here's
bold,
here's
it's a
here.
bold statement.
Yeah, I know. Here, there's only one top dress that sometimes horses need, but very rarely, and that's one we have to go with it. But when I sat down in the year 2000 to make this formula, I said, "What does a cell, one cell in my body, your body, it doesn't matter what whose body it is, require to be healthy and replicate?" Well, so I sat down and I put it on a piece of paper, all the things that I kind of learned over my first 30 some years and about all species. And I said, this little formula, if I could get it to the cell, this will take care of everything they ever need. And it'll take care of the digestive process and everything. And so all I had to do was take that formula, figure out how to get it to the cell and what to put with it for and actually I thought, well, I might have to change some of the major ingredients for different species, but and it's proved me wrong on that too. One formula I can feed cows, horses, goats, sheep. I can't feed it to sheep because it has too much copper, but we have fowl eating it, peacocks, rabbits. You name a species, dogs love it. They'll fight horses for it, and they will run horses off if they can to eat their feed if it's down where a dog can get a hold of it. And it's one formula. And it has worked for 25 years without a change.
Well, maybe this is a good time to tell us exactly what is in this feed. What do you use and how do you create? Is that part of your presentation you want to jump into, or how do you want to?
Well, my presentation maybe is a little more technical than your people would be interested in.
Well, maybe we can do that at the end, just so you'll have it to share with whoever you'd like to share it with. Because I'm sure I'll have some veteran. We've also got veterinarians that are asking and giving pushback on some of the claims as well. So as you can
Okay.
imagine, I've got 10 or 15 different vets that come to the farm as well.
Oh, I bet.
If you don't get the vets buying in, the client certainly won't. So we'll
No.
maybe get to that
Well,
at the end.
if we have quite a number of veterinarians around the United States that are now promoting our program. Veterinarians and farriers. Farriers love this program because it'll increase hoof growth and quality tremendously. Hoof growth will accelerate by about 50 to 100% in some cases, well, at least 50%, but 100% in some cases. And the hoof quality, we've seen a lot of hoofs go from, you know, just shelly hooves to high quality. And I've got I've got stories recorded of people showing me how they had a horse with a club foot that grew back normal. I had no idea why that would happen. But here's what, and usually it's from an injury or something like that where they get a club foot. The blood flow to the hoof is interrupted, slowed down, interrupted in some form. So if the blood quits flowing in there in that hoof adequately, suddenly they will literally quit growing. And all we do is we cause a vasodilation with one of our ingredients. Well, more than one of our ingredients, but we cause a vasodilation in the body. And if we can pump more blood, the hoof specifically, but other parts of the body too, we get more of those nutrients into that hoof. And not only that, we pump more blood, more total nutrients, but it's also the kind of nutrients. We have plenty of methionine and lysine and sulfur in here, which are very important for hoof growth. You can't grow hair or hooves without sulfur. And also magnesium, the very high class magnesium, copper, zinc is important. So if we use all of those ingredients, nutrients in the proper and most digestible and most usable form, then a lot of things happen. And not just in the hoof, but in the brain. Horses on Total Equine literally will calm down. 90% of high-headed horses will calm down. Not 100%. Some of them are just Looney Tunes. But the ones that are just the ones that are just a little bit anxious for whatever reason, and usually I think the reason is that they have a slight bellyache. They are having some kind of digestive issue. And so we can throw all those gut health things in there, and try to help them with that. And that'll probably help a lot of time. But we have to be adding a supplement. You don't have to do that with Total Equine. The gut health in horses is impeccable with Total Equine because of things we use in there. One of them is the Asclepias nodosum, which is simply a seaweed. That's just a scientific name for a seaweed. But I use one specific species that controls E. coli and other negative bacteria like that are causing a disruption of the chemistry in there. They cause a lowering of the pH in the cecum and colon. And if they grow too fast, why the hay digestion is lowered because as the pH drops and gets more acidic, the bacteria that live in that acidic level are ones that aren't very efficient at digesting hay or fiber or anything else. And if they're not digesting it well, it's not available, but also they cause a problem at the lining of that stomach, part of the stomach, that makes the absorption of nutrients less efficient. So where does all that stuff go that doesn't get digested? You haul it out and you spread it on the field. And we they're spreading about half of their feed out on the field. That doesn't make sense. So we can change that quite dramatically. But the other thing is the hormonal system of the body. You know, everything in a body is driven and directed by some hormone that it is the director of metabolic activity. Hormones, and most people think the minute I say that, they're thinking about the sex hormones, only. The No, there's lots and lots more that are important, not just those. Yes, those are important, and in a minute here I'll tell you why. Um, but the hormones of the metabolic hormones, and there's one set of hormones that people don't even talk about. I've never heard of nutrition talk about. They're eicosanoids. Eicosanoid hormones are those that are produced at a cell level. Then they're only active if in that area of the cell level. So they're produced and used to get stuff back into the cell. And uh, if we have the nutrients, and here goes back to our trace minerals again, we have those um, catalysts so that those reactions are more efficient. They're going to have better levels, and that's a little thing on the corner here that it might be having a great effect, but we don't ever talk about it. And I think our program obviously is helping that because of the efficiency level we've achieved.
So you just brought up a couple questions. Like as you're talking, I'm thinking of more and more questions. I'm trying to write them down so I don't
Yeah.
forget. This question relates to the initial question I asked about why can't they just eat forage and nothing else. So I think I told you I have a horse trainer. I'm not going to mention his name, but I'll send this video to him. He
Yeah, I've heard
feeds
about it.
cubed. He feeds cubed alfalfa. That's all he feeds. He
Yeah.
doesn't. He doesn't feed hay. He doesn't feed grain. He feeds cubed alfalfa. I don't know whether or not he supplements any trace minerals. I forgot to ask him if he's doing that. Um, but when I talked to you last weekend about it, you were telling me, well, here's what they're getting and here's what they're missing by doing alfalfa. I'm going to let you comment on that again for the record, but something that I also heard that you and I haven't spoke about yet. If you're feeding alfalfa to a horse, I'm to understand that alfalfa is loaded with estrogen. You just brought up the hormones.
It
Uh,
can be. It can have. I did work in college and with swine on cholesterol levels in alfalfa to swine. It would cause um, some partial infertility, and because it was too high an estrogen level. Cholesterol is an estrogen,
mhm.
and it's not directly like it is in soybean meal, but soybean meal and alfalfa both contain estrogen activity.
So that would, I mean, if you're adding estrogen to a horse, I would assume it's no different than like if you or I were to consume extra estrogen, or even any of the women in our lives were to consume extra estrogen, I would think that has some effect on our metabolism and other
It's not a
athletes and
positive.
everything else, right?
No, and it's not a positive if you get too much. And
Okay.
that, speaking of estrogen, I think that is why um, we have like my LNSC product, my one of my alternate products is starting to become more popular in certain groups. One of them is barrel racers. Barrel racers, typically women. Barrel racers typically run mares, a lot of them. And if you've watched barrel races, I know you have, and when you see one of those horses come down the alley sideways, backwards, sideways again, turn around, spin, and then finally somebody grabs their head and throws them in the arena and they go like a bullet.
Right.
Why are they doing that? A lot of that I think has to do with training, with the environment, but also if you have too much estrogen in those mares, it you take a group of mares, and if they're cycling, you're going to have fussing at each other. fighting, etc. Just being marish. I guess that's what people talk about is marish. And so I still have hay in my LNSC product. I took all the soybean meal out of it. And they're telling me their horses are doing better. Huh. That's the only really change I made in those two products. I took the grain and the soybean out of it, and they say, Mo, my horses are handling better. Okay, I think it was the estrogen, not the starch in the grain. It was the estrogen that these mares were reacting to. So, and so that's a kind of a theory, but just observing and listening, that's what's happening. And that's the only reason I can think of.
Okay. So, tell me what if I was just feeding pure alfalfa cubes, what am I denying my horse?
A combination of trace minerals. The vitamins, not so much. There's quite a few vitamins in there. You're probably not getting enough vitamin D and vitamin and a lot of cubes, probably not enough vitamin E, but you are insufficient in a lot of the trace minerals.
Okay.
And depending on where that hay comes from and where the cubes were made, it could be very deficient in vitamin E. Because there's a lot of parts of the country and some of the places where they raise a lot of alfalfa are deficient in vitamin E in their soil. But copper, I assure you, they're deficient in copper. That I don't have to guess at because I've never seen a hay sample with only about 8 or 10 parts per million copper, and it should be somewhere around 30.
Okay.
Now they'll get by because here's how people maybe miss their observation, and that is animals aren't performing kind of up to a level they would like. They look okay, but they're just not at a high level of performance that their genetics or their training or whatever say they should be. These reactions that I'm talking about and the catalysts of trace minerals and things, especially trace minerals, if they're slightly insufficient, not deficient, there's two terms you need to think about. Insufficient is just a lower level than that maximum. Deficient is where it really hurts a lot of things. But if they're slightly insufficient, those reactions aren't going to take place as fast. So things just slow down. The horses may look okay, but a lot of those reactions are not working as fast as they could. And that's why I'm a fanatic and a nut about trace minerals. So I overload a lot of times with some trace minerals. You're not going to hurt a horse by doing that. You might have a little excess, but they get everything they need so that whatever metabolic reactions or activities taking place, they are at their maximum that can be possible. And that's what we see in these high performance horses. We have some of the most high performance horses in the United States, like in the cutting world and barrel racing and roping on our program.
Can you tell
And
me,
that's,
can you name some of like I remember watching one of your son's podcasts and he had Punk Carter, Cutting Horse Hall of Fame guy, talking about your all's stuff and I mean, who all's using Total Feeds that some of my clients might have heard of, uh, who swear by it?
well, okay. Well, some of your clients may not know of those of us in the Western world, but Chris Cox.
Chris Cox, he's quite well known.
Oh, yeah. He works with all forms of horses. Craig Cameron.
Yep.
He has the uh, you know, wild horse races. They get pretty crazy. And let's see, Adon Banuelos. If people know anything about the cutting world, he's one of my neighbors here. Adon Banuelos is probably, I don't know if he's the most sought after, but one of the most sought after trainers for cutting horses. He's been on it for 7, 8 years without a break. Russ and Janet Westfall, two Hall of Famers in the cutting horse world. They're a man and wife. Um, they're like multi-million-dollar winners. They're also some of my neighbors. They've been on with me for 13 or 14 years now without a break, and they would never feed anything else. Um, as far as I can't tell you many about the big horses. I know we've got some good big horses out there, like your warm bloods and thoroughbreds and things. Not a lot of, but I know the one we have some that are very adamant about how well it's working on them. So let's see in the if they you have any breakaway ropers, Jackie Crawford is one, and Danielle Lohman is another one. Danielle Lohman she's been on it for many years now. She has thrown more than 1.5 second runs. Now she roped a calf in 1.5 seconds 3 or 4 times already. Do you know how long that 1.5 seconds is when you come out
Yeah,
of the
no, I
box?
could. I wouldn't even think about taking off yet in 1.5 seconds. Yeah,
You better have a long rope and a strong arm.
and I thought about. I see your son and Dale. Is it Brisby or Grig, whatever his
Yes.
name is,
Yeah.
the world's greatest cowboy or whatever. I thought about wearing a cowboy hat and a pair of sunglasses and having a shirt that said "World's Worst Cowboy." Like
You know,
I'd be the polar opposite of Dale.
well,
Uh,
Dale presents himself as the best bull rider in the world, right?
no, what I don't know, something like
The
that.
best bull rider. Yeah, that's what he claimed to fame. He rode a bull once.
Yeah,
He's a bronc rider.
yeah, he's
He
bronc
used to compete in bronc riding, but he tells the whole world thinks, that he presents himself as a world famous bull rider.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I've got kind of a list. So let's talk about ulcers. Um, we've got you saw we're feeding Gut X, we're feeding GastroGuard, we're feeding Gastro whatever. I mean, you name it. I've got a ton. So I want to talk about ulcers. I want to talk about the high sugar stuff, the horses that with the big bad crusty necks and they got to go on something for it's almost like they
Insulin
got
resistance.
insulin. Thank you, insulin resistance. I want to talk about colic and those. Let's cover those just in case we run out of time.
Okay,
I don't know what your schedule looks like.
give me your first topic.
The first one was ulcers.
Okay. Ulcers are something that I think are over uh, diagnosed, but it's real. Um, I think in a lot of arenas, almost every performance horse is said to be had ulcers. I'm not sure that's quite right. Here's how we move away from that. If you're feeding a typical pelleted ration, with grain in it, pelleted rations almost all have grain in them, and starchy feed, they that creates excess hydrochloric acid production in the stomach. Same as you and I, if we eat, excuse me, I should have done this earlier. Okay, um, if we have excess hydrochloric acid, it is an irritation to the stomach. Like you and I, if you get acid indigestion, that's what it is. So we can grab Tums or something like that, fill it down, and we're okay. They can't. They eat more and they eat fiber and they have a little belly ache, and this little belly ache can get exaggerated because it makes them nervous. You know, I'm not very pleasant to be around if I have a lot of acid indigestion. Well, they're not either. they're a little anxiety ridden, and so the more anxious they get, the more acid they produce. And the more acid they produce, the more they hurt. The more they hurt, the more acid they produce. And it goes like this. And then you put a little anxiety on it by pushing them real hard or putting them in an environment they're not comfortable with and they get nervous. That also adds to it. So suddenly you do have an ulcer problem. What about total feeds? Total feeds it does not contain raw starch. Raw starch in pellets is that when you pellet a feed, you grind it and you push it through this die hole that just makes a nice little hard. It doesn't do anything to the starch. All it does is cook it a little bit so they can get it through there, put a little moisture with it, but it really doesn't change the form of the starch or the physical part of it. Now, we're going to contrast that. We go over here and we make mine, and we make it by extrusion. When I say extrusion, that means it's put through a long hot tube with moisture in it. And at the end of this tube, there's a what we call a head. It's a dome at the end with piles and piles of little holes in it, tiny ones. It forces it through there with such an extreme pressure that it disrupts the starch and exposes a lot more surface area. Now, we put that in the horse. And if you do this with some of the Total Equine you have to see how, well, have you seen any that's dropped in a water bucket?
Yeah, I put some in water on purpose.
Yeah, okay. It will dissolve in, if you'll time it, 2.5 minutes, and it's totally dissolved. Why is that important? Several reasons, but one of them is that there's no raw starch and it's dissolved. And then when it hits that small intestine in the horse, we have 80 to 90 feet of small intestine. Do you know that? That's a long tube. Think about how far 90 feet is if you had a hose that was strung out 90 feet. Yeah. That has to go through all of that. And we only have so much time to move through there. Every 24 hours, we have to get everything through there. So if you have a full molecule starch without any change, the enzymes in there that are required to digest that starch in the small intestine, that's the only thing that dissolves them for most of that space. There's not very little fermentation takes place till near the end. And so it's very slow to dissolve and digest. Some of that starch may get into the hind gut, may get into the colon and cecum. And if it does, the fermentation takes place and they really don't get a lot out of that. So it ends up going out in the pasture again. Mm-hmm. Now, by contrast, the extruded grain is the starch is grossly disrupted. So smaller particles, way more surface area, and the enzymes that are used to break that starch down turn it into glucose. The glucose is absorbed in the small intestine very efficiently. I mean, extremely efficiently. But if that starch gets into the hind gut, it's not very efficient, like I said. So we've basically eliminated any starch, raw starch, getting into the hind gut. Well, just that in itself really enhanced the efficiency. But addressing why this helps with ulcers, that processed starch going through there so efficiently, it's not laying there creating more acid production. It moves through faster and it's less acid production. And also, when it gets into the hind gut, there's no excess acids produced there, like lactic acid, things. to cause a less efficient cecum and colon. That's why it works. And in the process, the horse doesn't get that nervousness because they don't have a bellyache. And also because it kills gram-negative bacteria or the E. coli and those bad guys, if you will, they then it's more efficient there too. And that raises the pH to more alkaline slightly. I mean, we're talking 1.5 units change, and that's all it takes. And we have a whole new population of bacteria and microorganisms, you know, protozoa and mold, and they're all in there. Yeast, it's a terrible place. And it stinks in there. And that's why it's busy working and digesting. Now, the other thing that when we talk about this, let's move out of the small intestine for a moment and go into the hind gut. The hind gut of a horse, the cecum and colon, is just like the rumen of a cow. What goes in there is fermented, and that's where they ferment all this grass and hay that has to go through all that intestine before it's really digested very well at all. And when they do that, there's three main things that they make. And this is in my presentation that they make. They are called, volatile fatty acids. They're just short chains of carbon that are part of the sugar molecule. They're all in the sugar molecule, and they start breaking the sugar molecule apart, which is a 6-carbon molecule. Okay. The bacteria can break it into three main components. One is acetic acid, that's 2 carbons. One is propionic acid, 3 carbons. One is butyric acid, 4 carbons. Now, if they make an acetic acid of 2 carbons, they can make 2 of those. That's it. They make 2 methanes or carbon dioxides. They have no value to the horse. Where do they go? Every time a horse moves real hard and passes gas, there's where it's coming from. So we lose a third of our energy from that molecule. Now, propionic acid are 2, 3, they can make 2, 3 propionic acids. And so it's very, very efficient. There's no gas produced. So if we can shift something from making too much acetic and if we get more propionic and less acetic, what happens? We have less gas going off, and we have more efficiency of digestion, and we have more efficiency of feed usage. Butyric goes without saying, you can only make 1 4-carbon unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 are gas.
So does that segue into the colic issue where it's not producing as much gas? Does that have any effect on colicking, etc.?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. When a colic, man-made colic, I use man-made and natural colic.
Okay.
Natural colic is when they go out on that fresh grass, eat too much, it has a lot of soluble carbohydrate in it. Then that gets back to the hind gut, and boom, boy, they ferment that so fast, and so they produce excess methane and carbon dioxide, from what I was just talking about. They also produce excess lactic acid, which is one of the products produced in there. So those things are necessary for energy, but negative if they produce too fast.
Okay.
If that gas can't get away fast enough, the first thing it does, it kind of plugs up the exit, the exhaust pipe. The gut will twist a little, or the gut will shift a little. And if anything interrupts that exhaust pipe from functioning properly, and you get too much gas going in there, that's colic. And so if 2 things, with Total Equine, you don't have that raw starch going back there, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one factor The other factor is when it gets back there, the seaweed I use in there is causes an improvement in fiber digestibility. And what did I say about pH? And digestibility improves of fiber, and the efficiency would come from the difference in gas produced or acids produced that are absorbed then and used as energy. It all starts to fit together. But in the 25 years I've used this exact formula, whether it was pelleted before I started extruding it in 2007, um, I for 7 years I was feeding it in pelleted form and it still worked, but in the extruded form it's even more safe. In the 15 no 18 years I've had it in the extruded form, never had anybody document a death from colic due to Total Equine.
Due to
That's all I
what?
can say. To colic.
Now
Yeah.
you differentiated natural colic versus man. I'm assuming man-made colic.
Man-made is stuff we put in their feed.
Okay.
Pelleted
So
feeds are
so
the culprit.
the pelleted feed,
Sweet.
they're more likely to compact. Is that the idea?
It's a speed of fermentation problem.
Oh,
You if you're feeding a pelleted feed, you're feeding 6 pounds a day, 8 pounds a day, every day, same time, similar time, everything runs smooth. Someone makes a mistake, they horse gets in the feed room, which is going to happen, and they eat 10, 12, 15 pounds. Well, you better have a veterinarian real close because that extra starch moving through that system fast gets into the hind gut and starts to produce those gases I was talking about. But the same thing happens on new young grass. New young grass can have 20, 25, 30% non-structural carbohydrate, which is soluble carbohydrate, which is sugar
mhm.
or sugar units. And if they get out there and they're not used to that, they don't know when to quit, and they love that new grass, they'll get too much of that soluble carbohydrate going in, and they're going to produce gas and they're going to colic or founder. And then founder is an also problem at the same time because if they produce a lot of lactic acid in excess, which is part of the fermentation process, if the horse absorbs a lot of lactic acid, it causes a vasoconstriction. What was I saying about the hooves a while ago? The hooves, if you slow down blood flow into the hoof area, what happens? Inadequate growth,
Yep.
and founder is inadequate growth of the hoof for a short period of time. You know, you've probably seen where people have turned horses out on green grass, and with 24 or 48 hours, they have horses hobbling around.
Yep.
It can hurt them fast. And that's really all it is. And then the other colic is the impaction. Impaction is different than the gas colic. There's two kinds, to me, there's two kinds, impaction and gas. Gas is caused by the starch. Impaction is caused by low quality fiber, inadequate water intake, cold weather, or super hot weather when they don't drink enough for what they're eating. And they get some of this fiber hay. Most of the time, it's if they're feeding like coastal down this country, it's coastal hay causes most all of it. Where if the horse suddenly decreases their water intake for a little while in the wintertime, it gets real cold. They don't drink well. And it only takes a few hours of them not drinking adequate water to change the ratio of water and dry matter in the colon, cecum and colon. An animal like a ruminant or a horse, they have to have about 3.5 pounds of water for every pound of dry matter they eat to keep that soluble. As long as it's soluble, the bacteria are working properly and it's flowing properly and everything's working fine. But you dry it out and it starts to lump together just slightly, impact. And you get a bigger lump, bigger lump, bigger lump until it blocks the exhaust pipe and they're not fermenting like they should. That's when you call the the veterinarian. They have to sometimes they have to cut them open, but a lot of times they can go in and actually dissolve the lump or the what's stopping it and get it to pass through. You'll never have that on feed Total Equine, even with lower quality hay. Why? One, they drink better. Two, they fermentation is taking place faster. Three, the fiber pieces are shorter because the fiber digestion is more rapid. If you watch, like, I don't know if you probably didn't pay attention when you put your horses on Total Equine, the fiber level in the droppings gets shorter. Why is that? Because it's digesting more efficiently and using more of it. So the droppings from a horse on Total Equine, if you go by and it's been there for 24 hours, touch it with your toe and it falls apart. It doesn't roll across the pasture, it falls apart. And that's a very, very good sign. In fact, you can tell how fiber digestion is doing just by stomping on the droppings of horses. I'm a turd kicker. I learned that in the feed yard business. You read what the cattle are doing inside by how the manure is, and you walk through the pen, sticking your toe in it and spreading it around to see what it looks like. My boys, when I was doing that, they were young, and they thought all I did was walk around and kick turds.
I'm
I
sure your
explained
wife
to them,
was with that too.
yeah. So that does that help understand a little bit about the colic scenario?
It does. It does. And, particularly the impaction, if you got a feed that's going to be completely dissolved in 3 minutes or less, obviously it's not going to contribute to the impaction part. It's now the hay could still cause it, I guess, the roughage.
Oh, it can. Oh, that happens.
Yeah. But at least what you're feeding them is helping, not hurting. And if you're feeding them a
Right.
pelleted feed, that like when I've made mashes before I was put onto this feed, I would use a pelleted feed, and one of the ways we would avoid colic in the wintertime is we'd fill the feed bucket half up with water and mix the feed with it. So it was like soup. It was feed soup, right? Well, if there
Mhm.
wasn't enough water, that stuff you could make like a solid ball out of that stuff. And you know what I mean? You had to have enough water to make it soupy, or else it would be like I don't know, like eating extra dry oatmeal. It just sticks together. And so I can imagine that food as they eat it, if they don't have enough moisture in their system, getting at some point in their digestive system and doing that exact same thing, just getting
Oh, it
clumped
will.
together, and they keep adding more and more to it until it forms just a solid clump of feed in their digestive tract. Um,
Now we have uh, corrected, I should corrected a lot of impacted horses by doing this. No hay. And even if they're eating hay and everything, you and the first thing that recommendations usually are to take them off grain. If you, I say, just take them off hay and get them pre-choice Total Equine. And with 24 to 48 hours, 24 to 36 hours, it's gone. It will solubilize that lump and get it gone out of there in that length of time. That's how important just putting basically water in there with a little bit of hard stuff in it. But there are no solids in there that are going into that system. So it does give it a chance to dissolve. It works
I,
every time.
I heard somebody describe your food as being pre-digested. The start.
that that maybe is a little strong, but
Yeah.
It prepares it better for digestion.
Yeah.
It's not digested at all, but it's prepared so that it's easier to digest. Smaller particles, more surface area, allow more enzymatic activity in the small intestine. And that's what they're probably thinking
It
about.
is it sort of the difference between eating raw meat where the proteins have not been broken down at all versus meat that you cook. You're breaking those proteins down so that when you eat them, your body can digest them faster and more efficiently than you could a protein that's not been subjected to high heat. Does,
Yeah,
you with
as
me?
long as you don't as long as you don't cook the meat too hard, then it goes backwards.
Right. Well, yeah.
If you want a bellyache, eat a lot of overcooked beef.
I've never, yeah, I don't, I've never experimented with that, so I couldn't tell you. So we've been going well over an hour. So do you want to do your sort of your presentation that's very technical, or do you just
I,
want to wrap this up and
I don't think we need to.
okay, good.
Um, the one thing that I would like to leave with you though is a few little things that we didn't talk about, and I can send some of that to you, and then you do what you want with it.
Okay.
But this seaweed, it has a lot of far-reaching things. That's why I use it. I've used it for 35 years in everything I've done. And it's that good. And even in my human product, that's a very critical key part of my human product. It improves the digestion by keeping a better pH in the digestive tract, but it's documented. It decreases or improves hay efficiency. It helps increase vasodilation in general, and it helps feed the nervous system so that the nervous system will run at a better, more uniform, more normal rate. Those are three things it does. And when it comes to trace minerals, there are several forms of trace minerals. There's sulfates, oxides, which are most people should never use because we used to use them in the old days and they're not efficient at all. Then what came along with the amino acid complexes, which they're touting as being just like mine, but they're not the ones I use. And then the chelate. Look up the word chelate, Chelate, and it is a Greek word, stands for claw. And what it does, it takes an amino acid, and I use the smallest amino acid there is. Out of the 22 amino acids that they have to have every day, this is the tiniest one. It's a 2-carbon amino acid. It acts like a claw because it has two negative charges. It'll grab a trace mineral that have two plus charges, and it makes them inert. They don't dissociate, or they don't separate in the early part of the stomach. And when they get into that first 6 or 8 feet of the small intestine, the duodenum, they have to be absorbed there, but not mine. All other minerals have to be absorbed there or they go out in the pasture. You want to fertilize the pasture, use a lot of oxides. Oh, there they go. The ones I use can be absorbed anywhere in the next 40 feet of the small intestine in the jejunum. So they're almost 100% bioavailable. And besides that, the magnesium I use is chelated so that it'll create a much higher level of magnesium in the blood than any of your other forms that you put in a diet. And I told you about how important magnesium is for uh, nutrients getting into the cell, especially carbohydrates. So I've talked now about the three things that make my program work better than the average program on the street, and probably better than almost most of them. And that is the extrusion, the chelation, and the seaweed. Those are the three things that make my program work. Otherwise, It's
What
just like
else is
everybody
in
else's.
what else is in the feed? Are you using alfalfa as a base?
Some alfalfa, 25%. I use almost 20% sorghum grain, which was the safest grain in the world. There's no allergy to it ever known, and rarely ever is a problem with these, you know, all these things they want in grain. And then I have some soybean hulls, which are just the hull part of a soybean, which are a very, very good fiber source, and some wheat middlings, which is a very extremely good ingredient for feed products. It's a good source of phosphorus and digestible protein. That's a byproduct of the wheat industry. And rice bran. You could probably hear a lot about rice bran. People want to put rice bran in their feed and think they've really done something great. Well, it's good, but it's just a component.
Mhm.
And then other than those major ingredients, they make up 90 some percent. What makes my program work is about 2.5 or 3 to 4% that I put in special. All the little bells and whistles that I've been talking about.
The chelated minerals and the seaweed and the extrusion process was probably your
That's
that's
the key.
those are things you're doing uniquely, correct?
Well, there, there are other extruded products on the market, but if they're not used by other things, they're not going to compete.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure I'll think of 100 questions I should have asked you as soon as we get
Oh,
off.
that's fine. We
Yeah.
can do it again.
Okay. Well, great. So I appreciate it. And oh, I know what I did think. So my wife asked me this. She's like, find out why when we first switch the horses over, why they don't want to eat it all at first, and they just because a couple times the horses would leave some of the food in the bucket after we fed them. Now that behavior disappears after a day or two, but for some reason that concern she was worried about why the horses didn't just want to gobble it down like candy as soon as you present it to them. When you switch them from a pelleted feed into the total equine.
That's a good question. And I think I know the answer. An animal eats from a biofeedback from their brain. And as sugar goes into the bloodstream and the sugar level goes up, the brain says, okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. But we don't need to eat any more right at the moment until that sugar level goes down, and then they're going to get hungry again. And the difference in timing between a pelleted product and total equine is dramatic because within 15 minutes or 20 minutes, they're already getting sugar going into their bloodstream and getting to where that biofeedback is detecting that. And so they slow down. Yeah, and then later they'll chase you all over the pasture for it and gobble it down. But that's because that quick biofeedback probably is new to them.
Hmm.
And so they go away for a few minutes or a short period of time and come back and finish up.
Good.
Not too complex.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's better than my explanation. My explanation
Oh, okay.
was that if you if you're used to eating chocolate cake and bonbons, and then all of a sudden somebody puts healthy food in front of you, you're probably not going to scarf it down the same way you do the junk food. So
Yeah.
of course they're not eating as fast, but
No.
yeah, your explanation was better maybe.
If we would have had more time, I would have showed you some couple of charts and stuff, but we're okay.
Well, feel free to record yourself explaining that chart. It looked fascinating where you were starting with a cow and we're going to compare it to horses. That appeals to my wannabe intellectual brain. But since I'm producing this actually for distribution to other people, I thought maybe we should hit all the high points
Well, I think we did a great job. I think your process here uh, got all of the critical points in there. And then if people really want to learn more or challenge me on it, and oh, by the way, that no hay program is not for everybody, and I'm not really pushing it. It's just I use that as an example of how efficient our program is. But if you have people that really will challenge you, especially the professionals, if they wish to call me, I'd be glad to visit with them if they have specific questions or criticisms of what I'm saying.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely share your info and I'll post
Yeah,
this, and I'm sure we'll get some comments or questions. And I'll just, you know, the fact that you're not hiding and you're welcome. You'll take all comers if they have questions. That's evidence in itself that you're not just trying to sell something. Now,
yeah.
um,
I'm I want healthy animals.
yeah, we're
That's
gonna.
been my goal for 50 years.
Yeah, one of the next things we're going to do is we're going to see if we can't get you a distributor a little bit closer to Lexington, Kentucky. This is the horse capital of the world, and you got to drive 3 hours to get a bag of your feed. That's unacceptable.
I
We
know.
we got to see what we can do about that, and maybe you and
Yeah,
I'll
just
talk offline about some feed producers in the area. Maybe we can reach out and get that going.
well, I'm sure there are some good dealers there that could possibly be interested, and if there are, just give them my number and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and it was perfect timing when I got a hold of you on my way through Mississippi. I
I'd say so.
I just happened to be 30 minutes from Tupelo, and that place you told me had Total Equine, thankfully,
Yeah,
so I could take it down for my trainer to start feeding to my horse. And
yeah,
he's run a nice little experiment. This
right.
mare's been in training for 6 months now, and all she's had to
Yeah,
eat the last 6 months is the alfalfa cubes. And my instruction for the next 90 days is he's going to feed the Total Equine. In addition, I'm having him monitor if she cuts back on her hay cube intake, and just kind of he'll be the guy that can give me good feedback because he's ridden her 5 days a week for six
there you
months.
go.
If there's a difference, he'll be able to tell pretty quick, I would think.
Great.
So we'll see if in the next week or two, when I check in with him, see if he can tell any difference or not. Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll get off here, and I appreciate your time, and thanks so much
Okay.
for
You
sharing this
bet.
information with me.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'll stop recording now.